Five Nights at Freddy's movie came out, and oh boy, is there some stuff to talk about. For some context, I would say that I know the general idea of FNAF and watch playthroughs of like the older games, Sister Location, and Security Breach, but I'm by no means an expert on the FNAF lore. I did, however, watch this movie with both my dad, who has almost no experience with FNAF, and my brother, who has been in the FNAF fandom for many more years than I have. I think I'll talk about the general gist of the movie and when we reach spoiler territory. And for people who don't want to get spoiled, I'm assuming the general question is, should I watch FNAF? And I think yes, for most people anyway. I'm basing this experience first on how my dad watched the movie. You can get the general gist of the movie without really needing to play the games. After all, it's just the story of animatronics come to life and try to kill everyone, survive the night. I think the movie did a pretty good job of translating game content into the movie medium. Because if it was a direct translation of the game, it would just be a bunch of clicking around cameras of little actual movement, especially when you base it off the first game. When you actually play FNAF, you're already in survival mode because you, the player, don't want to get killed. I do see how they needed to build up who Mike, our main security guard or protagonist, was, and his relationship with Abby, his sister, in order to make the audience care and want him to survive, as opposed to a game where you already your self-preservation. The voice acting was like okay at some points. I do think the dialogue was a little corny, a little bit, especially when these like grown adults saw animatronics and they're like, "What the heck?" Because it's PG-13. Some of the animatronics did look a little goofy, but I think that's also to be expected because the animatronics designs in real life are kind of hard to make, quote unquote, like scary. The movie feels more like a thriller than a horror, in my opinion. But also, my expectations for this movie were like rock bottom because it's a video game adaptation, and I feel like movies that are adapted from video games and anime and other types of medium are very hard to do. So the expectations, anything above horrible, was pretty decent in my book already. Most of the jump scares in the FNAF games are kind of in your face and sometimes kind of a knee jerk reaction. And although there's a few jump scares here and there in the movie, they're not as prevalent in the movie since a big bulk of the movie is spent building up who Mike and Abby are, since we see what the main character's life is like even outside the Pizzaplex, because it's this constant of like him going back home, then going back to work, and it's like every day. There have been some movie critics saying that the movie wasn't scary enough, and I do agree that it wasn't particularly scary. I also don't feel like the movie took the fear factor very seriously. Is this movie going to be like a cult horror classic that takes horror super seriously, like some classic like The Shining or Alien? No. But I think it's a fun ride if you know the general story of Five Nights at Freddy's, or you just want a movie that can, kind of turn your brain off while still enjoying a few thrills. I think the Five Nights at Freddy's movie may have been scarier if it had more gore added a higher rating. But I will also note that a lot of kids play Five Nights at Freddy's. So there's a pretty decently young audience, and I wasn't super opposed to the movie rating. But if you're someone that's like really hardcore into the Five Nights at Freddy's lore and you want like the super mature like Springtrap getting butchered in a vent or something like that, I feel like you do have to keep that in mind with this movie because it's like has some moments, but it's a little bit goofy, a little silly. Overall, without spoiling too much about the movie, I think if you had no experience with Five Nights at Freddy's, there are some jokes or references that can kind of fly over your head. I think if you watched it with like little experience of Five Nights at Freddy's, it's like an okay movie. It's decent, but the core story of Mike and Abby might not blow your mind because without knowing Five Nights at Freddy's, and even while knowing Five Nights at Freddy's, they're just kind of like some dudes. They're just some people. If you're a casual enjoyer of Five Nights at Freddy's and like the general like gist or like some semblance of the lore, or maybe you catch a couple references, I think the movie is really fun and a great thing to watch because it's like, ooh, he said the thing, kind of like monkey brain mentality whenever you spot a video game reference or like a YouTuber collaboration. If you're someone who's super into Five Nights at Freddy's lore, like my friend that also watched the movie, and you're hoping for like a movie that sticks with the canon lore completely, I feel like you would nitpick some parts because they do diverge a little bit, especially with Vanessa, the security guard, and a little bit of like Mike's development, which I will talk about in my spoiler section. I just feel like I feel like the movie was made mostly for fans, but they still wanted to attract the general audience. But I also feel like if you want like strictly adhere to the game, the movie's probably not going to be that because it's hard to translate to a medium, and also I feel like they did change some stuff from the source material. I do want to talk about the actual game itself right now. The movie, sorry. I want to talk about the actual movie itself. So spoiler warning. From here on out, I'm going to be talking about specific parts of the movie. So if you haven't watched it yet and plan to later, you can always click off now. Okay, so now we're in spoiler territory. First of all, I'm surprised they were even able to make enough content to last an entire movie, considering it's kind of hard to translate Five Nights at Freddy's into a movie, so kudos to them for that. I actually, in terms of YouTuber collabs, I didn't even recognize Matt Pat at first because I was cleaning my glasses when he came on, but all of a sudden, when I heard, it's just a theory, my fight or flight response activated when I heard that. So that was interesting. Also, apparently his name tag was Ness from the Sans Ness theory, which I found kind of funny. In terms of William Afton, so it turns out that my dad actually recognized the actor for William Afton as one of the actors in the first Scream movie, which is cool because, even though he doesn't know Five Nights at Freddy's, at least he recognizes some of the actors. And also, at the end of the movie, when William Afton says, I always come back, the audience in the movie theater absolutely screamed. It's me. I'm the audience. I screamed. My brother and I also screamed when we saw the Corey Kenshin appearance. My dad was really confused because he just thought he was a taxi driver, and then the entire audience erupted in like screaming. Um, it was this interesting dynamic of like my dad really not knowing what's going on with the movie, me knowing like some of it and like the general like lore and like a few of the references here and there, and my brother probably knowing the most. I think it's a goofy movie that isn't really a super scary experience, but it is really fun just seeing a bunch of Five Nights at Freddy's references. And it's kind of a movie where you just like kind of turn your brain off. Um, it's really for, I feel like it's really made to entertain the fans. Also, hearing the Five Nights at Freddy's One Living Tombstone song at the end credits was berserk. It like sent a blast to the past to the 2010s era. It was great. I was screaming the whole movie. It was literally just me shaking my brother's shoulders like a madman back and forth with the "he said the thing" meme. I think the movie was good as humanizing the animatronics a little more. I do understand that like the whole like Bonnie and all the other animatronics like helping Abby make like a pillow fort scene was a little bit like kitty and like not shown in the games. I thought it was cute. You don't really see that in the game, and I know it's like a little silly and kind of random, but I think it humanized them a little more, made them less, definitely made them less scary. But I also feel like the movie wasn't really trying to make it as I guess, isolated and dark and terrifying as some of the other games have tried. I feel like the setting was so good. It gave me like, it reminded me a little bit of like the type of camera work in like Stranger Things, like old VHS. They mentioned a lot about the bite of '87 and mentions of like the '80s and stuff like that. Gave me kind of like a old rundown Chuck E. Cheese type of vibe. It was a great environment. Setting up the restaurant and prompts had a bunch of really cool green references. I think they mentioned like Sparky at some point. And overall, it was just a really good way to set up the atmosphere. Some of the animatronics did look a little goofy, obviously because they had to translate it to real life, and of course that's always hard. I remember like there was a scene where like the cupcake jumps when attacking Mike, and I thought like I know like in real life it would look goofy either way. It's just that the imagery of a cupcake leaping, like CGI leaping towards someone was a little silly to me. Especially when like he was trying to stun it with the stun baton. It's a little hard to feel scared when a cupcake kind of flings itself in midair like that. Um, but I also understand that like, in the game, the cupcake is there. So it's not like they're making it up. In terms of like animatronics, I'm pretty sure the cupcake had like one of the highest kill counts. It had a higher kill count than like Freddy, who like didn't do that much. Which is kind of funny. I think it would have been nice if the movie had used some of the game mechanics more. I understand that like you can't click cameras the entire movie because then people would be bored. But I feel like there could have been. I think it would have been nice if there was more of like action scenes where instead of Mike just kind of like stun batoning a bunch of animatronics, if he really used the cameras and vents to his advantage. Because I feel like we never really saw him like clicking buttons and closing doors. Kind of like a situation where maybe he and Abby are stuck in a room or something and they have to defend the vents for a certain amount of time. I think that would have been cool. I personally found the appearance of Vanessa a little random. Um, I remember Vanessa from Security Breach, and I just thought it was a little strange. Like in the context of the movie characters, how does Mike not question her just kind of appearing out of nowhere as a cop, constantly checking on this restaurant, and why she's so invested in this Finance or Freddy's chain when she's supposed to be a cop doing like cop stuff. But I mean, I can't take it too seriously because we kind of know what we came for when we went to this movie. Apparently, so it was interesting that in this movie, Vanessa is like, this is major spoilers, but it's interesting in the movie that Vanessa is kind of like the daughter of William Afton, since I don't really remember that being confirmed in Security Breach, so maybe they changed some stuff, because I don't really know all the lore behind Afton, except I always come back, and all that stuff. Yeah, it was interesting. I think they diverged a little bit, because I'm pretty sure the security guard in the games is like the son of William Afton. So it's a little strange for Vanessa to be the daughter of William Afton in the movie. I don't know how they're gonna change any of the lore if they decide to make a sequel or future movies or something. But yeah, it was a good movie for Five Nights at Freddy's fans. It's not like a masterpiece, but I think it was a really fun and enjoyable ride. Also, the soundtrack slapped. Like that Foxy Fatality OST, really good. Just all around, it was a really good movie for fans. And that's pretty much it. Bye.